How's it going, you guys, and welcome to your morning cup. Now let's talk about the civil war in Myanmar. What was once an inevitability when it came to the coup actually breaking out, and the people and the sheer resemblance of the protests that erupted against the coup, it was obvious that this is where it was all going to go down to. If the coup leaders or the military coup itself did not understand the repercussions for their actions when they suppressed people in their own homes, when they laid waste to thousands of protesters, when they opened fire with live ammunition, when they shot and killed a 7-year-old girl, when they broke every single aspect of the human rights code, it all boiled down to this moment right here. Now in the town of Taze, Myanmar, we understand that protesters fought back to a T with upwards of 6 truckloads of soldiers. Now these soldiers initially infiltrated a neighborhood and opened fire on the protesters, but what was different was this group of protesters were prepared for the fight. Protesters fought back with homemade weapons, guns, knives, bombs, shields. Earlier we understood that these protesters were by no means going to turn violent, but things have quickly deteriorated to a point wherein we are no longer in the starting stages of this coup. You see, Myanmar was under a military coup till the year 2011, and 10 years of their liberty and 10 years of democracy for them meant the world to them. If you try and take liberty and freedom back from the people, this is not going to work out. You see, in a massive clash, 11 protesters were killed and 20 were wounded. Fighting continued till the early morning hours, and no word of any casualties was reported from the soldiers' side. Of course, the coup leaders do not want to put this information out there because they don't want other protesters around the country to get any kind of motivation or any bright ideas, if you will, when it comes to picking up arms and fighting the army where it stands, fighting the coup where it stands, and taking back a nation that is actually theirs. You see, what led to the retaliation of the people with arms of their own? Well, speculation dictates that the Myanmarese army at first came into the town of Taze, according to news media, with live rounds being fired, grenades being used, airstrikes being conducted, machine guns being mounted and open fired on protesters to disperse the crowds, who were merely demanding to restore Aung San Suu Kyi's government and the AAPP back into power. It turned into an all-out war zone. Many protesters, many army officials, both sides armed to the teeth, one with professional military grade equipment, other with homemade retaliation means, booby traps, old school technology at their disposal, and a sheer scale of numbers. You see, history is testament to the fact that even if a well-armed militia, or an army if you will, is against an entire nation full of unarmed people, it always ends the same way. The unarmed people, no matter how many of them are lost, always win. What we also understand is the fact that a senior general by the name of Min Aung Hlaing said that the CDM, or the Civil Disobedience Movement, what the protesters call themselves, is the reason for the nation to have its downfall, apparently. He also stated that it has disrupted the working of hospitals, of schools, shutting down of roads and offices, as well as the factories around the nation. And this CDM is the reason why Myanmar will be destroyed. Nothing to acknowledge the fact that it is his coup that brought in disruption in the first place, that it is the coup that took apart a perfectly functional government, that took apart a perfectly functional society and threw it into turmoil because they wanted power, because they were not being treated the same way that they were when they were running a dictatorship. And of course they wouldn't be. When you're running a dictatorship, you're essentially a king. Nobody can say anything to you, because if they do, you will have them assassinated, just like kings did back in the day. But when it comes to this situation, what we understand is the fact that no matter what you might believe you are, it all ascertains to one thing, that democracy prevails, that the people have liberty and freedom for all. and no dictatorship has any place left around the globe today. You're living in the 21st century, and if you don't understand the difference between the 21st century and the 17th century, it's not the world's fault. You cannot put all of that pressure onto the bearing shoulders of the regular people. You cannot use them as expendable resources. You cannot shoot them down to make a point. You cannot make an example out of a father who was merely protecting his family, barging into his house and shooting at point blank range, missing and killing his child. You see, what we understand is the fact that without a shadow of a doubt, the people of Myanmar are no longer going to be holding back. For long enough, they've seen their fellow protesters die. For long enough have they seen their fellow protesters just being shot in the head for merely voicing their concerns. And just in the year 2021, we understand the fact that nothing of this nature has ever been witnessed. In the year 2021, where the world is moving towards more progression in terms of technology and a global united front, Myanmar is in turmoil. You see, people cannot be suppressed and a military dictatorship cannot be sustained. International outcry continues, but with China and Russia vetoing every single boots on the ground initiative by the United Nations, it is quickly turning into pre-existing agendas that China and Russia have. China predominantly is supporting the coup by supporting them with technology, providing them with facial recognition software that they have used to go and crack down on senior protest organizers, on regular protesters. Russia, for its own accord, considering the fact that the world is distracted with the coup, it's making moves on the Ukrainian front, trying to capture even more territory, openly threatening the United States as well as NATO that if any action is taken and if any boots on the ground initiative is even taken in Ukraine, they are not holding back. You see, the one thing that the world is not ready for right now is a war on two different fronts. A war in Myanmar that has an international intake, as well as a war in Ukraine. Because if Russia goes to war with Ukraine, we can best believe that NATO gets involved. If NATO gets involved, this quickly turns into a global scenario. And even if we do not look at World War III, we're looking at major players in the game being involved. Major players the likes of which we've only seen in those old school commercials. When we saw bear fighting an eagle. Yeah, it might just come down to that.